brand new X3. In this video, we're going to talk about some of the engineering, the changes, and of course how it drives. This has been redone on the inside and out. And when you look at this in the United States, at least, you get two trim levels. You get the 4-cylinder version, which starts at about $50,000, and you go all the way up to the M50i, which is about $75,000, this is what I'm in, fully loaded. This gets the B58, the inline 6 turbo with mild hybrid in this iteration. All vehicles come standard with all-wheel drive now. When you look at the outside, and this is, something that BMW's done, they're injecting all of their new design cues in all their vehicles. And, I said this about the X3 a long time ago when I first did a video, and I said BMW has been iterating their design for so long that all of the vehicles look the same on the inside and out. And many brands were copying what they did, took the best elements of it and made it better. So it was getting stale, and I feel like BMW took that, threw it out, and now they're doing this. And now too many people are talking about how they don't like it. They're not classically beautiful cars. They're more focused on the here and now of kind of modern design. And this is another vehicle that doesn't look all that cohesive on the outside. There's elements you can pick and choose that are nice, but overall, you're gonna have to decide is this for you? I think there's better looking SUVs on the market at this point, but I'm gonna leave it at that. The interior space is following that same trend. It looks more like their electric vehicles, from the steering wheel out of the iX to their standardized now curved display for infotainment and gauge cluster. Even the door design, when you look at it, the geometry, the intersecting lines, the fabrics, the leather, it definitely looks more modern in the way they've integrated the ambient lighting in the door through the plastic and the center stack based on your mood is interesting. It might jump out at you, it might not, but there's a lot of plastic in here. It feels like there's a lot of plastic, and there's even piano black here, which they weren't really big on before, but it's in high traffic areas, like on the door and the center console. But overall, it's interesting. Again, they're not trying to do the same thing. So if you like that, you're gonna probably love this. Let's talk about some of the usability first. The door storage is incredible. They're one of the best in the business. You can fit an enormous bottle, a tea kettle in there if you wanted, with room to spare for other storage items. The center console has been cleaned up quite a bit. You can fit 2 phones. The cup holders are huge. There's a massive chasm for storage, and the armrest isn't all that bad. Plus USB-C ports and USB ports all over the place. And if you opt for it, you can get the rear vent controls and the manual rear shades. Again, these are all optional extras. When you look at the overall capacity, this has grown in size. It's longer and wider, so you have more cargo hold space. You have more human capacity. It feels like a bigger vehicle, and it's just better overall for usability. And it still doesn't feel enormous. When you put the seats down in the back, you can fit a ton of stuff in there. The back seats are spacious, and even with the seats up, there's plenty of room. Under the floor in the back, or the cargo area, there is a small spare tire for people that really like that. But overall, when you go up the trim level like this one and you get the contrasting leather, it does have a pretty good wow factor. The seats for the M50i are way better than the previous generation. They're far more bolstered. They feel more supportive and comfortable at the same time, which is great. The only negative part is if you're trying to put the rear seats down now because the cargo hold's so big, you're gonna have to open the rear doors to put the seats down because there's no release in the back. And if you're a shorter person, that might become an issue. Let's talk about the frontal cabin space. Again, if you've seen any of BMW's modern design, you're probably going to like this. They've done some cleanup here, like your light switch is now on the stalk instead of having it by your knee. The vents are very small. They're not intrusive. You can still adjust all that, but everything is very, very minimalistic. Everything is basically relegated to the screen. While there is some haptics on the door, in the center console area, there's still physical controls on the steering wheel, thank God, but basically everything else you're gonna do is in the screen. And this is iDrive 9. It's the fastest thing they've ever done. It's one of the best pieces of software in the car industry other than Tesla, but you have to be prepared to make shortcuts for all your common tasks, because when you're trying to look for anything, good luck. I mean, seriously, you have to use the search function to find the basic stuff that you want. It is ridiculous. You're really gonna have to sit down and figure out how this works. The HVAC controls have been improved, usability is way better, seat heaters, seat cooler, the heated steering wheel function is really quick and easy. It's not laggy, which is great, especially if you're in the software layer. Mapping works good. And then if you choose to add some of the connected features, you're gonna really have to look at this and what features you're gonna wanna add in terms of apps. The one thing I will tell you, and this is very important, is to look at the privacy settings. They've added a camera at the top here, and if you go through some of their privacy settings, BMW will data mine some pretty wacky stuff, like monitoring passengers' facial expressions. I would go through there and disable as much as you can to allow, whatever features you need to use, and disable the rest. Just be aware of that. The audio system in here, you can do the optional Harman Kardon, which is not expensive, which is great. It tests pretty well, other than a suck out at the 300 Hertz region and some harmonic distortion in the same region. It sounds like a very flat audio system, though, to a fault. It lacks brightness, and the soundstage feels very compressed. It feels very monaural in here, even though the cabin is really solid. This is a brand new vehicle. There's no squeaks or rattles, but I think they did a good job with the cabin solidness, and the audio graphs prove it's a good audio system and a good space for an audio system. I just wish, when you go up to the $75,000 price range, I wish they had like the Bowers or something a little bit better than this. But overall, the interior is pretty impressive, but we're gonna take this in the shop and talk about some of the engineering. The brand new X3 has a whole host of changes, so let's get started with aerodynamics. That outside shape may not be the most attractive, but it works. This is one of the most slipperiest vehicles in the segment at 0.27 coefficient of drag. This is achieved by the frontal area having active shutters. It has air curtains on the side, these spats and air guides, although minimal, on the front, and this is one of the smoothest underbodies of any BMW internal combustion engine. The panels have been redesigned, namely in the rear, where they help to flow air over the rear suspension. Things like having a flat muffler in the back aids in reducing drag as well. This gets the latest generation, depending on your wheel and tire package. It gets the latest of low rolling resistance tires to improve efficiency and increase fuel economy in certain trims. Even the M50i with the B58 or updated B58 gets an improvement of like 2 miles per gallon in the real world, which I definitely noticed right away. So when we talk about the other parts of the body structure, stability, it's got the same wheelbase but wider track. It's more stable. They made some improvements to the kinematics of the suspension. It has a split lower, long and short arm. This is a strut, but the strut assembly is far more rigid than it used to be, which gives you better dynamics in the front, along with the fact that they've changed the kinematics to give you more balance and a larger caster offset. So again, stability and high-speed braking and all the other things that they play with. The other improvements are on the adaptive damper side, namely, obviously they're optional, but in the M50i, the improvements in the adaptive dampers give it a wider range of adjustment. So on the softer end, it is noticeably improved in ride quality. You can still ramp it up in sport mode and get better body control, but it's better as a daily driver now, and they knew they wanted to make that improvement because BMW, at least the M versions of the car, were always a bit too harsh as a daily driver. So one of the things they tried to improve. The other thing is, in the steering gearbox, they have gone to an EPS unit with a belt drive in it. And this is from Bosch. This is their latest generation of steering racks that is trying to deliver a little bit more feedback to the driver. However, most of that design is because the rack is able to provide more electronic force to the wheels, which will help in the future as they do over-the-air updates to improve semi-autonomous driving. The extra force is able to deliver more torque to the wheels and take control better. It also has the ability to do over-the-air updates. There's also cyber security built into the EPS rack itself to prevent hacking on the rack side through networking. And also there are different changes to the rack that allow them to go full steer-by-wire if they so decide to do in the future as they build these cars out. The other thing, they've made some improvements to the integrated brake system. The brake-by-wire system has also been improved. The speed of the electronic actuators are quicker to react, which means all these stability control modules are also improved in this car. So again, it's about improving the communication between all these electromechanical systems that allow the software side to be updated and to improve the speed of reaction during the self-driving modes or semi-self-driving modes, which leads to one of the biggest changes. The sensor pack and camera technology has been improved 360 on this car. The control unit has been improved, the ECU, which means the driving aids are much quicker to respond. Better lane keep, better prediction, read-ahead technology to adjust suspension, to predict crashes or to slow you down, and all those driving aid systems work better in this car. The whole concept of improving some of these electromechanical systems are all tied into that. The last part to talk about is the drivetrain. You get the 2-liter turbocharged engine makes about 255 horsepower, And the B58, which has been updated here, borrowed, has improvements to the crankshaft, the fueling system, and it also has a mild hybrid in this generation. It makes about almost 400 horsepower or 450 pounds of torque. It is tied to an 8-speed ZF gearbox, which is the same across the board, and it is standard now with all-wheel drive. So this gets a locking rear differential. It's kind of that middle ground M diff. This is about driving dynamics on M50i, also being a great daily driver. So the mild hybrid system is not a plug-in. It's just there as an electric motor inside the gearbox to give you a little bit of electric assist. It's more than the torque side than the horsepower side. It also helps with start-stop, which, to be honest, the start-stop system isn't as smooth as it should be in this car. But we're going to take this for a drive and see how it behaves. All right, let's see how the new X3 gets off the line. B58 mild hybrid. The torque converted ZF is one of the best pairings in the modern universe. The X3, this makes this feel a lot better than it actually is. So let's get into some of the mechanical changes. I would say the steering, despite some of the marketing saying you should have more feel, more directness, it feels very similar. If there's a change, it may be in that like last 10% of driving. It's got a good weight to it. It's not very heavy, even in sport mode. It's not overbearing or synthetic. I would say that's where it's kind of at its best. I mean, most people that are buying this don't really care about the steering part. It's because they made the steering rack change that I wanted to bring it up. The other thing is smoothness in drivetrain, because you are paying money. You're paying a lot of extra money to have this engine and transmission combo in here. And I would say that this brand does a great job in terms of calibration between its normal setting at this point. So when I flip it into just the relax mode or the normal mode, the engine is not surgy. The throttle control is pretty smooth. The updated brake by wire system feels more natural than it did before, and I say that loosely. I mean, it's still brake by wire, but the good thing about this is, you're talking about a run-of-the-mill SUV that absolutely tears it up. I mean, this thing handles so good. I mean, whether you're going slow or fast, there's always the sense that it's still a rear-wheel drive platform. You're not fighting the front end, you're not fighting the back end. The stability control system is set up where it always feels very, very controllable, but very nimble. And I think, when you're comparing this against many of its competitors, regardless of price point, that's why you're buying this. It is very, very enjoyable to drive. It is very quick to drive. I would say this is on the upper end of what you would actually need. The question is, do you need an MX3, an X3M? And yes, an X3M would be faster, but it's completely unnecessary. This thing absolutely tears it up on a back road. I mean, you can get through any corner as fast as you want. The stability control is a little bit invasive when you're driving it like a monkey, as it should be. This is a bigger, taller vehicle, but the big thing that this car does, the X3 here, is when I just flip this back over to personal or relax, the suspension calibration is changed quite a bit here. Where BMW has always had a problem with having a very overly jarring, stiff suspension in their kind of M models, this does a really good job in the lower modes where it goes soft. That first 10% of impact is far more compliant. You have a little bit more travel before you feel the effects of bad pavement into the seat and into your driving experience. So when you're driving now as a daily driver, there's far less trade-off of driving the M50i or the other M iterations before, where trying to make it too sporty, too harsh, and where you're spending most of your time is on like these normal settings. And this is where it is a real, feels to me, a very big improvement before. But if you still want to go back to sport mode and you want a really stiff damper profile where that rebound and compression rate's up and you feel that more stiff impacts, there's better body control, it still does that. I just think the range of adjustment has improved here quite a bit between your soft and your sporty settings, which I really, really like. There's no longer, you know, wishing you had the lower trim level to get the softer ride, and then, you know, having not the extreme damper settings when you want to drive it like a dick. They did a really good job here with that. And, you know, really that's what you're looking for, right? You're buying a BMW because it separates itself from the competition in terms of its driving aptitude. While not every system is perfectly, like, there's not a lot of feel here, but I do feel like the brake-by-wire system, the steering calibration, and the actual engine and transmission calibration here are, I think they're getting better at it, and it feels far more natural to drive. And remembering this is an SUV first, what is the primary things you need it to do? It's got to be quiet, it's got to ride good. It does both of those. The handling, whether you're going in slow speed corners or high speed corners, you get a ton of stability. It feels great to drive, very agile. And it's probably, you know, I'm not going to say that the price tag is justified. This is way too expensive, like almost every single thing, but it is very, very enjoyable to drive, whether you're putting it around or going fast. But I'm going to leave it at that. Let's get into the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the new X3, but first, thank you to James Orton and Devon at Anderson BMW in Crystal Lake. James Orton has been helping us for a long time. He's been at this dealership for quite a while, and he's a really honest guy. He's super easy to work with. While they don't have the biggest inventory, they're not out trying to sell a cajillion cars. They've always been really straightforward, and he's always been helping us out. In the case of BMWs, we always get them way late. We don't get them right away in our market, so you know, it was nice to be able to get this early on and talk about all the changes that were made, because they sell a lot of these. And if you're a BMW fan, you might be interested in this. So let's talk about the final thoughts. The reality is, on the engineering side, they improved everything they needed to do from the previous generation. The big thing is it's more usable. The interior space makes a huge difference. The cargo capacity makes a huge difference while not making this vehicle feel enormous. They've improved the technology, namely the safety suite is way better. Now, you could argue the tech on the inside because they went for this more minimalistic interior approach, but now they've cluttered up the user experience by having all these menus and sub-menus. You really have to get used to that, and that might be something you're going to want to look at before you commit to this. In terms of drivability, it rides better. It's a smoother operating vehicle when you need it to be on your daily commute. It doesn't always just feel very harsh or firm for the sake of it. If you're on bad pavement, this is definitely going to be more tolerable in the sportier settings and even in the more comfort settings. So I like that. The drivetrain and the balance of everything, the car feels more connected than it used to. I think they're starting to figure out some of these electrical mechanical systems. Like, big complaints about BMW is they throw all this stuff at it, but it feels very much like a simulator. You don't have a great feel of what's going on with the car, and I think they've smoothed some of that out. It's better to drive this generation feeling more natural, while we know all these systems are there to help improve on the safety side, giving them more electronic control of them. It does drive more like a vehicle versus kind of that sim. So I appreciate this car. I think you're gonna like it. You know, it's just the price point. Like everything, it's too expensive, and I'm gonna leave that up to you if that's within your budget to deal with.